Let's start on the Republican side with you. The horse race here, Mitt Romney way ahead, Ben Carson at number 2, Rand Paul at number 3, and Chris Christie and Jeb Bush bringing up the far rear. Talk about what you found interesting in those numbers.
Well, what it really shows is how wide open this race is. We've never seen anything quite like it, John. If Ann Romney is right, Mitt's not going to run, then it's totally wide open. I also don't think his numbers are all that impressive at 17%. What really strikes me, though, is Jeb Bush down at, what, 4%? It's just such a gap between the establishment and the rank and file. Chris Christie does terribly, too. You know Ben Carson a little bit, Al. Talk about, I mean, the big surprise of this poll is him up there in that second place. If you add in the second choices, he's even higher. Talk about what you think are his strengths and his potential weaknesses. First, a personal note, John. He operated on my son, so I know him very well. He is every bit as good as his reputation, one of the great pediatric neurosurgeons ever in the history of the world. I think his appeal is that he is a genuine outsider, number one. People hate Washington. Secondly, you know, there's a certain niche in Republican conservative circles for an African-American conservative. It was Herman Cain 4 years ago, Alan Keyes before that. This guy's so much smarter than they are and so much more authentic. So I think and he's got a charming, low-key manner about him. Of course, I will say this. Politics may not be brain surgery, but he's never been in politics before, and that's going to ultimately trip him up. Very striking. We have this graphic up here. Ben Carson with 28% of the self-identified Tea Party voters in Iowa. We know the Tea Party is very strong there, and so that gives him a real base to work with. He's also not very well known. That's with his first and second choices, 28%. Right. Jennifer, let me ask you quickly about Carson and then turn to the Democrats. He's only been there a few times, once this year, I think. Does he have a following in Iowa that this poll suggests?
Yeah, he does. The Republicans I talked to said they really like his straightforward style of telling the way like it is. They also just like the fact that he's got this kind of up from the bootstraps story to tell. They find that very compelling. And like Al said, Republicans here really do like to be able to be perceived as all welcoming. They want to be all welcoming of any Republican, and Ben Carson allows them to check the boxes on that. All right, Jennifer, let's switch over to the Democratic race. The horse race number is really not that surprising. Hillary Clinton with a big lead, 53%, and everybody else back. Elizabeth Warren, the only other one in double digits. But we also asked a question about whose views do you more identify with, whom better represents your views between Hillary Clinton and Elizabeth Warren. And there, the race is tighter. Hillary Clinton doubles Elizabeth Warren in that number, but still a tighter race. Does that suggest to you that if someone, probably not Elizabeth Warren, I would guess, but if some Democratic populist comes forward, there it is, 52-26%, if some Democratic populist comes forward, do Iowa Democrats want someone else in the race who maybe is closer to Elizabeth Warren on the left than Hillary Clinton, more towards the center? Hillary Clinton has such a huge lead. That's the biggest thing out of this poll. There's always some wiggle room. Iowa Democrats are always willing to look at someone else. I mean, you look back at 2008 during that cycle, and at this point in time then, everyone was presuming that Hillary Clinton was going to be the nominee, and then you had this upstart Barack Obama come in. So you can never tell. So, Jennifer, the president's numbers, the current president's numbers in Iowa, favorable, unfavorable, much worse than Bill Clinton's. And we asked the same Democrats, again, likely caucus-goers on the Democratic side, which would Hillary Clinton be more like as president, her husband or Barack Obama? Overwhelmingly, they said her husband. Presumably, that's a big source of her strength there for Iowa Democrats who like the 42nd president more than the 44th at this point. Right. I think they're hoping that a Clinton presidency would be more like, you know, her husband's than Obama's. They're a little bit disillusioned with some of the things that are happening in the Obama administration right now, and they're looking for something fresh, different path. Al, let me bring that question back to you, the same question that Mark just asked Jennifer. Hillary Clinton should take some solace, obviously, in that number that people think of her, expect her to be more like her husband than Barack Obama. Republicans are obviously going to try to paint her as a continuation of Obama. Do you think she'll be able to maintain that going forward? Well, I do, John. I think that's an asset for her now. But ultimately, she's going to have to be not going back to 1998, but going forward to 2018. So it's a good credential to start with, but it's not going to be sufficient. There's one other thing that really jumps out on the Democratic side and the related to Hillary Clinton in the poll, Al, which is that a fair number of Iowa Democrats seem to feel as though her ties to Wall Street are not an asset for her, but they are a liability. Talk about that and how serious a problem you think that might be for her in Iowa and elsewhere.
It was interesting, John, because her interventionist policies, Libya and Iraq and so forth, are actually supported there. But Wall Street, a plurality, said that really bothers them. She's too close to Wall Street. And I think some Democrat, the type that John mentioned earlier, it's not, Mark mentioned earlier, it's not likely to be Elizabeth Warren, but someone is going to find that a soft spot, I think.